Real quick, I will take one question here. Do aborted babies go to hell? God forbid is my answer. Leighton, do you want to say anything to that?
Of course not. They're innocent. They haven't done anything wrong. They haven't sinned against God.
On a scale of difficulty for theological questions between 1 and 10, I would say that the question, do children that die in utero go to hell? I would say that that ranks at about a 1 in terms of difficulty. I agree with Braxton Hunter and with this other gentleman, Leighton. No, children that die in utero, whether through abortion or otherwise, do not go to hell. But note what Leighton says, this other gentleman, in terms of his answer. He says, no, of course not. They haven't sinned against God. They haven't done anything wrong. That raises another question. When a child reaches the age of mental and physical capacity such that they can intentionally and willfully, quote, do something wrong and potentially, quote, sin against God, is it then possible for a child to go to hell? What age is that a child can willfully act in a way that is obstinate and has some degree of moral culpability to it? I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years old, somewhere around there. But at some point at that early age, there's at least some degree of moral culpability that a child acquires that they did not have in utero. So then the question is, if that child dies, do they go to hell? Christians have often, particularly Christians who have a particular approach to soteriology or to the doctrine of salvation, have a particular answer, way of approaching this question of saying, well, there's an age of accountability. And so before that age of accountability, children are protected so that if they die, even though they've done sins to some degree, they're not held accountable for them in an absolute sense, and they can still be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven and not go to hell for eternity. But then that simply again raises the question, when is this age of accountability? And there are at least two pivotal problems with appeal to an age of accountability. The first problem is it's not clearly delineated anywhere in the Bible. And one would think the distinction between a child going to heaven and a child going to hell for eternity is a pretty significant thing that you'd want to clarify. So if there is some age of accountability before which children are not held morally culpable and after which they are held morally culpable, one would expect God to be very clear on defining when that age of accountability is. Is it a particular age? Is it a particular level of cognitive or moral development or awareness? And if so, why doesn't God allow people to know with the same clarity that they can know when a child, let's say, is 17 and is a legal minor, and then that moment when they have their 18th birthday and they now become a legal adult, that they have different obligations, responsibilities, and potential penalties for misconduct or law breaking in society? And government is very clear on when that demarcation point is. Why is not God equally clear or even more clear on an issue that has inestimably greater import? The distinction between going to hell forever versus going to heaven forever. So that is the one problem. There's a second huge problem with appealing to an age of accountability. And that problem is that moral culpability and moral responsibility is graded. It's on a continuum from lower culpability to greater culpability. A 2, 3, 4 year old who has some degree of moral culpability for actions is not going to have the same degree of moral culpability as a 10, 12, 13-year old or a 20, 21, 22, 23-year old. Older you get, the more you have moral culpability in relation to your cognitive development, things like your ability to have impulse control and to anticipate consequences. And while that is a clear gradation, there's an increase in moral culpability over time. The difference between hell and heaven is a binary. Yes, you can have gradations within hell, gradations within heaven. You can say, well, a person goes to hell forever. They suffer more greatly or less intensely, uh, depending on their degree of moral culpability, but they still go either to heaven or hell. There is a binary there. And so this concept of having an age of accountability forces that binary thinking that the moment before you pass that threshold, you will go to hell. Maybe you'll suffer less because of a lesser culpability due to the fact that you were a 4 or 5 or 7 year old, whatever. But nonetheless, you will go to hell forever. and it's a binary option. So that is an intrinsically problematic concept, given that moral culpability is so clearly gradated. So these are two huge problems with the easy appeal to an age of accountability in talking about the soteriology or salvation and potential damnation of children or others that are on a continuum of greater or lesser moral culpability, cognitive awareness, impulse control, ability to anticipate consequences, etc. All of this is to say, yeah, it's easy to answer the question, what happens to a child who dies in utero? It's immensely more complicated to talk within this same paradigm of thinking about salvation, to talk then about the salvation of a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, and so on. I talk about these issues at some length, specifically in my book, What's So Confusing About Grace? If you're interested in exploring that further, I've linked it below. So, those are my quick thoughts on the damnation of children and infants and those who die in utero. I will just say myself, I don't accept any of that paradigm. I think that entire paradigm is a deeply flawed way of thinking about salvation and restoration.